Hello, everybody. Tomas has already anticipated where I was going to go with this. He said, I caught the tail end of your live on the other channel, which was my Stephen Heiner channel. If you don't know about that channel, if you're just a subscriber to Palestine Bookshelf, the Stephen Heiner channel is where this project originally incubated. And he said, I'm curious to know a little more about the person who asked you why you care, crazy sentiment, and perhaps one afforded to an American because of the relatively plush life that is afforded to you when you do not notice the regime and criticize it. So, Tomas, just to give you some context, this person who asked it didn't ask it in that tone. So let me try to imitate the tone. Why do you care? Right? He didn't ask it that way. He's a genuinely curious person. He's really quite a fascinating person. That's a different conversation for a different time. But he has been purposely kidnapped in Mexico as part of a training to be better and more alert in unfamiliar surroundings. So he went through training and then someone scooped him up on the street, kidnapped him. He's been on a desert island for 10 days, again part of a program. He had to catch his own food and build his own shelter. He has hiked Everest Base Camp. He recently he's lived with the Maasai in Africa, the hunter gatherers, for a few days. And his most recent adventure was in Mongolia, and he lived in a yurt for a few weeks. So this is someone who is genuinely curious about the world, and he's curious about people. So let me rephrase it so the tonality sounds right. Stephen, why do you care? Why do you care? So in English, particularly where you put the emphasis is where it came out. So when he says, why do you care? I realized it may not be obvious in the sense of you don't have to ask a Palestinian why he or she cares, or you don't have to ask an Israeli. Or for people who are politically engaged, I am not one of those people. I haven't voted in the U.S. election for many years. Um, I recently had to for my French citizenship interview, I had to study who the prime minister of France was at the time. I didn't know. I'm not politically engaged. So politically engaged people might. But um, I realized no one had asked me that question because I think they were just accepting the information I was giving. And I'm not saying that I hadn't thought about it. It's just that no one had asked me that question. And I thought that would be a good way to start today's live stream is why do I care? So I wrote down some reasons. The first one is I have been to Israel and Palestine, and I have had a chance to meet people on both sides of this issue, hear their thoughts, and and process that for better or for worse. So I've been there, and it isn't an intellectual idea to me. It's something that um, I've actually interacted with. Secondly, it's a land that's important to me. As a Christian, the Holy Land is holy for me. Regardless of what other religions may have to say about it, that's not relevant to me. I don't care. I only care about its importance for the Christian religion, the one that I'm a member of. And the the relevance for those of us who have been raised in that tradition and going to the sites that you've only ever read about in scripture and pondering what had happened there. When I was at the pool in Bethsaida, which is not a pool anymore, it's dried up, but this was a pool in which people had to wait. There would be an angel that would come and move the waters, and the first person to go down to the water would be healed. And there was a man there who waited for almost 40 years, but he was a cripple, and no, he didn't have any friends, because when the water moves, you should have a posse of friends to grab you, throw you into the water. But he was alone, and our Lord approached him at that time, and have you no one to help you? No, and he was healed there. And um, going to Hebron, where the the patriarchs' tombs are. So Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, they're all buried there. Just pondering what that was. Going to Bethlehem, going to the place of the nativity, especially this time of year where Christ was born, being able to venerate that spot, going to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, um, being in the sepulchre. You're very limited, and that's probably a conversation for another time, is what happens when you're inside the Holy Sepulchre. But there are so many people waiting in line, you really only have 15 or 20 seconds to be in there before you're hustled out. And I tell people this all the time about the Holy Land, that it's not going to be this transcendent experience where, things try. There are times when you can get very emotional at different spots, but in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, well, I was in the sepulchre with two other ladies. There's only room for three people at any given time. They're crying, and I understand that. I was just simply trying to take a mental picture of this place. This is where Christ was laid to rest, and he rose again on the third day. And I said, I will ponder this later. I can't do it while somebody's counting down to get me out and other people are being emotional, but I just took a mental picture of it. So firstly, I've been to Palestine and Israel. Secondly, it's a place of immense importance to me. I would like to have access to those sites, and I would like other people to have access to those sites. Thirdly, I am financially involved in harming Palestinians. As a US taxpayer and as a French taxpayer, some portion of the money that I contribute goes towards arming Israelis who then use that to bomb Palestinians. So I am financially involved in harming Palestinians unwillingly, but that is another reason that I care. Fourthly, and this is a bit more generic because there's an injustice going on. However, unlike other situations of injustice around the world, or even domestically, whether you're in France, whether you're in the United States, wherever, whatever country you might be in, this is an injustice that is known and approved of effectively by the whole world. And when I say approved of, no governments have done anything to stop it. Just continues. So that is another reason why, yes, there are many other cases of injustice, and in some cases, it's the ones that are least known about that should get more attention. In one sense, that's very difficult. The Palestinian issue, no one can say they don't know what's going on, especially post 2023. But for example, the Rohingya, people don't know about what's going on with that. People don't know about the Uyghurs, but they're not charismatic issues in that sense. What I mean is, the people who are most invested in what's going on with the Uyghurs are Muslims or the Chinese people, because it is an issue of Chinese Islam. For other people to be really invested in the Uyghur issue, they have to be generically interested in injustice. But the problem is that we as human beings are limited people. We do not have infinite brain space, we don't have infinite heart space, and we don't have infinite wallets or time. So we have to pick our battles. We have to think, where can I be of help in what particular cause? So there is injustice all around the world, on every continent and in your own backyard. And you have to make a decision about what injustices you are going to care about. This is an injustice that I deeply care about. It doesn't mean that I don't care about other injustices in the world, but I have to be honest and say I clearly don't care about them as much as I care about the Palestinian injustice. Fifth reason, it's a convergence of all that is wrong with the world today. When I think about everything that is happening, obviously at the very top, we have the Israel lobby. We have Israel using money and guilt to get whatever they want done all around the world, built on a fabric and tissue of lies, lots of lies in lots of different arenas. So there's the Israel lobby sitting on top of everything. Then you have people who have claims to land that are being ignored. and it's because they don't possess anything of value. I promise you, and I've said this before, if Palestine had oil or gas or cobalt or diamond deposits, suddenly there would be a resolution to this conflict. But since the Palestinians have nothing to offer anyone else, helping them has to be an act of self sacrifice and potentially one in which you would die. And that originally failed in 1948 with the Arabs who considered themselves co religionists. So if the Arabs who considered themselves helping their larger their Muslim brothers within the Ummah, they weren't willing to commit all of their forces and all of their money and all of their effort to defend the Palestinians. Why would I expect people who are not Muslim and who are not of the region to do that? So that issue of, do I intervene in situations of grave injustice, even though it's far away from my shores? That's a fundamental question we have to ask ourselves as a world. Because up until now, within my lifetime and for many people, the US has been called to be the arbiter, and the US so often fumbles this. In fact, I'm challenged to think of a time in the last 100 years in which the United States has really done something well on the international stage without screwing it up in some way, either at the time or later. And we can talk about that in the chat. And the last reason, I guess this is reason number 6, is I'm interested. And that is that that's not something that everyone may be. So, for example, in America, there are people who make a living just talking about sports. They wake up in the morning and they have a job. Someone pays them obscene amounts of money, or if they're YouTubers, someone makes that they make a decent amount of money and they just talk about sports. That is something which is operating at a level which I get that in some senses this sports are helpful to people. I get that. People can be inspired. People can get work ethic. I get why someone might be inspired by sports. But to dedicate your entire life to sports or a sport seems to me wanting. It's not immoral. I just find it to be unacceptable for me, for my worldview, what I consider is the end of this life and the goal of the life to come. It doesn't make any sense to me to spend my entire life about sports. So, in that same sense, can I spend my entire life about Palestine? No, I can't. I have other things that I have to do as part of what I've been created to do on this earth. But I am interested in the small amount of time I have to myself where I'm not doing my duties of state. This is an issue that is particularly important to me and which I'm willing to spend a disproportionate amount of time. So, to put that in context, I want you to think about the time it has taken between October of 2023 and December of 2024 to read 50 books about Palestine and Israel and to watch, I don't know, a dozen documentaries. That is not a short amount of time. But it's not that much time compared to what so many other people have done, whether that's in protesting, direct action, volunteering. There's so many other things that other people have done in a much more significant way. I'm hoping to help out in a very small way, in the way that I can, in a way that makes sense for me. So those are all the reasons. So when someone asks, why do you care about something? Let this maybe be a good opportunity for you to think through that exercise for yourself and just say it might be self-evident, but there's never any harm in writing out the reason you care about something. And to recap, for those of you who are joining a little later, why do I care about the Palestine Israel issue? One, I've been there. It's a real thing for me. Secondly, it's a land that is important to me for various reasons. 3, I'm financially involved in harming Palestinians as a French and US taxpayer. Fourthly, the injustice is enormous and approved of by the whole world. Fifth, it's a convergence of many things that are wrong with the world today. And finally, it's an issue that I'm interested in personally. Okay. So let's go to the chat. Desert. I just spotted live stream. I'm headed out. We'll watch the video later. I'm not a bad person. Thank you for liking the stream, Mantis, and I hope you have a happy new year wherever you are in the world. I care because I support those who resist oppression, and I appreciate that, Mantis. And as I said, it's just a question of how many causes can you care about. There are lots of people who resist oppression in the world. There is no right answer. The idea is why support all of them? Well, you clearly can't, and there's nothing right or wrong about supporting one over the other. I just tell people to pick their battles and make sure that they're not just making a good use of their time, but an effective use of their time as well. Extremely fascinated by social engineering. So once I saw that George Soros played a hand in the college protests earlier this year, I knew I needed to take this path as deep as I could. Yeah, Cruz, that's an interesting one. As you know, looking at what you are not allowed to talk about as an indication of something that you should look at, right? So, for example, if there is a law passed that says it is illegal for you to deny a historical fact about something or some people in some war, that to me is an immediate reason to suspect it. Because truth doesn't need police enforcement. There are no police going around enforcing the 2 + 2 = 4. We all know it. And if you want to deny it, we can all just laugh at you. Or you can live your life with the consequences of thinking that 2 + 2 = 4 is a theory rather than a law. But when you have to pass a law that can put people in jail because they don't agree with a historical fact, quote unquote, that to me immediately makes it suspicious, immediately makes it doubtful, immediately makes it something worth looking into more. So that's a great indication. So maybe that's something to look at. So there's a law that makes it illegal for you to deny something, and you think, wow, that's really something I should look into. So here you saw, George Soros is involved in something. That's definitely something I need to look into. And I'm sure this happened for a lot of people during COVID as well. They saw all of these weird creatures like, who is that strange alien creature? Klaus Schwab. Klaus Schwab, and they see this creature come out on the world scene, and we go, okay, well, there's something definitely wrong here. Or when they need to change the definition of what a vaccine is in order to further their agenda. So, Cruz, you're not the first, nor shall you be the last to get a cue to investigate something because you see something really suspicious, and I'm glad you did. Shaylee, hello. Money, guilt, blackmail. Yes, I know what what we're referring to there. The Israel lobby. And on this point, right, money and guilt may be obvious. Blackmail, a lot of people have not seemed to square the mystery of Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein was a Mossad honeypot. He was there to get blackmail and other important information from leaders all around the world and important individuals. And that's why he had to be eliminated. And that's why his contacts are not anywhere. Mossad cleans its tracks afterwards. And as we can see, we've all moved on from it, even though he committed suicide and all the cameras were turned off. Yeah, please. Shelley, I think you were probably talking about the idea of what happens when there's injustice. Thanks for sharing your viewpoint on this topic. I appreciate how you see it, sports reporters. Yeah, I think for me, Shelley, it's we know what a society values by what it spends its time on. And in the United States, we spend a lot of time on sports and celebrity and television, film, media, things to distract. There's an epidemic of food as entertainment in America. So people will spend money going out to eat because they are bored. This is a reason. If you've ever watched, and I have a very guilty pleasure watching Caleb Hammer's Financial Audit. So if you haven't watched Caleb Hammer, he will invite people onto his show who have gotten themselves into terrible financial positions, and then he'll basically grill them. He has their bank statements, their credit card statements, and then he asks them, like, why are you spending money? He gets very angry and agitated. I think that's part of the show. He knows he's like that. But for whatever reason, he really cares about helping people recover from making horrible financial decisions. He has incredible passion for it. He uses quite a bit of foul language. So I'm just, watch with caution, cannot be recommended for children. But uh, what that focuses on, one of the things that people consistently say in those financial audits is when he says, "Well, why are you eating out? You have no money. Why didn't you buy food from the grocery store and cook at home?" And they say, "Well, I'm bored." Or they say, "Well, I can't just stay at home all the time." And the idea of food as entertainment, uh, this is also an issue in France and in the United States. I can't speak for it in other countries. I'd be interested to hear if people from other countries have thoughts in the chat. But you can understand what a society is by where it places its time and energy. And look at the culture around you, look at the society, and you will see what it values. And for whatever reason, sports is one of the most important things in American life. There are a number of reasons for that, which maybe we can get into if people are interested. But I cannot imagine, you know, getting to the end of my life and saying, what did you do? Well, I was a YouTuber about sports. And I just think there are so many things that you could have done with your life apart from commenting on something that doesn't have any value beyond this life, this world. There are things that you should invest in which will pay dividends in eternity. But that's probably a deeper, as I say, a deeper, different conversation. Um, Tomas, attention is a limited resource. Yeah. And that's why I say we can't just say we care about injustice in general. That's not true, because if we did, we care about everything. At the same time, we shouldn't feel guilty if we don't care about all the injustice. Injustice is a terrible thing. And in fact, it's listed as a beatitude. Christ, he picked a number of things to talk about. One of them was injustice when he listed the beatitudes. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for justice. That's something that he articulated as important. So that means we have to be mindful of what is it that I'm going to pay attention to, without saying that the other things aren't important, but just realizing I'm limited as a human being. I befriended a reporter who is there on Facebook. It's actually happening. Yeah, Chile, I don't see it stopping in Palestine, unfortunately. If that's one of my takeaways from 2024, it's that 2025 is going to be more of the same. Our criminal justice system. Chile, are you in the United States? Is that what you're referring to? Okay, you live in the US. I'm beyond grateful for all the opportunities and many privileges I'm blessed with because I live, but the US is currently trembling on a very shaky foundation. Yeah, I think it's always been trembling on a very shaky foundation, Chile, but part of what has covered that up, you can cover over a lot of problems with money. Right. If you think about, for example, let's before we get to a country, let's go down to a relationship. So whether it's a friendship or romantic relationship, problems in the relationship can be covered over by other things. And you might sense that there are still problems, but other things are keeping that at bay. So, what has kept the problems in America at bay for so many years has been unbelievable prosperity. Unbelievable prosperity. And a lot of people, because they haven't ever left the United States, have no idea how blessed the United States is, naturally speaking. Not just for things that are very beautiful and cannot be used for financial purposes. So, for example, the waterfalls in Yosemite cannot be monetized. The buffalo roaming in Yellowstone cannot be monetized. So there are things that are gorgeous about America that are just there in the background. But then there are this wonderful topsoil, which that's a different discussion about how we farm in the US. But there's a natural protector of ocean on two sides of the United States. On to the north of the United States is a mostly peaceful country that has never had any problems with the United States. And to the south is Mexico, which is effectively a failed state and doesn't present a military threat to the US, although it presents other threats. That's a different conversation. So America has been financially booming for so many years because of all of its natural resources, the system which it lives in, which allows people to build and keep a lot of what they create. So that's changing more and more. And a temperament of the population which encourages risk taking. There are downsides to this. Okay. Enron, the great financial crisis in 2008, there are downsides to it for sure. But I, as someone who has grown up in that sauce in the United States of, hey, take a risk. If you fail, that's okay. And seeing how that doesn't at all come through in other cultures and in other countries, and they marvel at how Americans think about things. That's something that, when I think about what's going on with the U.S. and, as you say, that shaky foundation, um, it's it's been shaky for a long time, in part because of how the country was constituted, the whole lies about free speech and freedom of the press. That if you if you look at the fundamental idea of what free speech is, it means that saying good things are equal to saying bad things, and that they should be given similar protections. But free speech is a very new concept in human history. It didn't used to exist. So people think freedom of speech means that you didn't used to be able to say things that you believed in. And that's not true. People have been allowed to express themselves for centuries. How do you think the Divine Comedy was written? How do you think these cathedrals got built? How do you think all of this great art was created prior to quote unquote free speech? We've had the ability to express ourselves, but what free speech gave was the chance for evil and vile things to also be given the protection of law. Meaning, if I say that you should be allowed to rape minors or marry your sister, there's no reason why I shouldn't be allowed to say that. That's what free speech is. And then people say, "Oh, well, it's this and this." And no, no. If you believe in free speech, then you can say whatever you want. But that's not true. That we know that that's not true just on the common sense level. It doesn't make any sense. Same thing with freedom of the press. We've realized what freedom of the press is these days, and from the beginning, is the freedom to do whatever the people who pay for the press tell you can print. That's the freedom of the press. And we've seen it the last year with Palestine and Israel. Babies getting killed in Palestinian refugee camps. No mention, no condemnation of Israel. Why? Because we have a free press, apparently. It's not a free press, it's a controlled press. It's not free speech, it's controlled speech, but people want to pretend about things. And so the United States' shaky foundation, it dates from the beginning, but it was covered over by a lot of prosperity. And that prosperity might be coming to an end. Tomas, on the shortness of life should be required reading for everyone. Tomas, that was the very first book review together with Leo Tolstoy's How Much Land Does a Man Need? I did that for the first book review for the Stephen Heiner channel originally. So if you want to go back and see a very rough version of that, you can look on that channel. Leo, why do you think Israel attacked the Liberty? Well, Leo, I alluded to it a little bit on this last weekend's film club live stream on the Al Jazeera documentary. And I'm going to cover it in this week's book review that's coming out, Blood in the Water. But there was an arrangement in between intelligence agencies. So there wasn't coordination between the US Navy and LBJ, et cetera. They found out later. But we needed a pretext to get involved in the war. And the bombing and sinking of a US ship would do that. We could blame Egypt for that, because surely Israel wouldn't have bombed a US ship. So we sink our own ship by letting one of our allies bomb it. Then we say Egypt did it. Clearly, they hate US, they hate Israel. We bomb Cairo, and we get involved in the war. We needed a reason to get involved in the war. Remember that the president at the time of the Liberty is also the president who faked the attack with the Gulf of Tonkin. If you don't know about it, go look up the Gulf of Tonkin resolution. You'll realize that was a false flag attack. If he could do one false flag attack, he can certainly do two. And to say that he had nothing to do with the Kennedy assassination, I think, is also naive. That's a different conversation. Oh Lord, that topic gets me heated. The state that humanity is currently in is saddening and sickening. Humans should always look after one another, yet so many are being absurdly selfish and disregarding their peers. Yeah, Chili, I think there is a real coldness in the world today. There's a lack of love. Ultimately, it comes down to a question of love, does it not? That we have to recognize, um, part of recognition is why we're here. So, why are we here on this earth? Is this just some random rock that had an amoeba get struck by lightning and then suddenly we have life and it won't matter when the sun burns out in however many years? Or is there a greater reason why we're here? And if there is a greater reason why we're here, what is it? And how does it relate to our fellow humans? I think that's a important question. Okay, so we've somewhat, Chaley, there's only two choices: fear or love. Yes, and um, one of those choices expands within you and spreads in a positive way, and one of them eats away inside you and doesn't do anything for anybody. So I feel like the choice should be obvious, but so rather philosophical Palestine bookshelf live stream today. But just to give you a preview of what we're doing in 2025, I feel, thank you for joining, hopping in for the live stream. I feel like pulling some books from the shelf and sharing with you what we're going to be talking about next year. And well, maybe I'll do that on another stream because I'm just seeing how they're all stacked up, and they're back. You can't see it, but there's another bookshelf back there, and that's where I have them, and I have them in the order that I'm going to cover them next year. But let's just say it's going to be, I think, more detailed. Up until now, Palestine Bookshelf has been trying to give you a broader sense of things. So, how did it start? 1948, and what happened then. That's really the key to everything, is understanding 1948, and then also understanding what happened before with the British Mandate, what happened before the British Mandate with Zionism and Herzl. And so what we're going to see in 2025 is more detail. I'm going to be covering more international law as regards the settlements. I'll be talking about 1967. That's really, 1967 is the state we're in now. So all of the problems we have today actually come from 1967. 1948, it's important to understand how did this all start. But 67, if you don't know what happened in 67, then you don't understand why Oslo was such a failure. You don't understand why the settlements got started. So we'll be covering 67 pretty early. I want to say it's scheduled for February, sometime in February of next year. And once we cross that bridge together in Palestine Bookshelf, it opens up understanding more things. But I'm trying to do things in order so we're not having to go back so much. And that's why Oslo has been waiting so long. I haven't talked about Oslo on the channel, is because I have to set the table with a lot of things first in order to get you ready for Oslo. If you just enter into Oslo and you don't know what happened in 67, you don't know what happened in 73, you don't know what happened in 56, you don't know about Nasser, you don't know about Pan-Arabism, you don't know what happened in Lebanon, you don't know what happened with what some people call the civil war in Jordan, what happened in with Oslo and the total failure, probably the worst decision for the Palestinians in their history. You have to do a lot before you get ready to understand what happened at Oslo. So I'm working on it, but we'll get there. But 67 will start that process for us. So once we've covered Tom Segev's 1967, unbelievable book. Just, he's such a good writer. He's so talented. Chaley, you just spotted Paddington. Yeah, so that's a Paddington bear from Paddington Station in London. I wish the Orthodox Jews who oppose Israel can get more attention, because as Zionism gets more heat, it becomes easier for the collective to boil all this down to only one race being responsible. Yeah, Cruz. The thing is, it's not just the Orthodox Jews that really, I would tend to say. So Ilan Pape characterizes the current state of affairs as the state of Israel versus the state of Judea. If Israel is the secular project of the Zionists and Judea is the religious project of the crazy people. Right now, the government is beholden to the latter group, the settlers. They're in the ascendancy. And October the 7th only pushed more people who are on the left or in the center towards supporting the settler movement. But a house divided against itself cannot stand. And there is no way that the state of Israel, with the gay discos in Tel Aviv, and the state of Judea with the religious messianism, we're going to take over Egypt and Syria and Lebanon and Iraq. Those two peoples can't live together. One is going to triumph, and I think we're going to see more development of that in 2025, 2026, but not to the relief of the Palestinians. If I've learned anything in 15 months, and as I say, 50 books and 10 something documentaries, is that this change can only happen from Israel. It is not going to be imposed by the outside. The US has no moral backbone to do anything. We're in bed with the Israelis. The French are in. No one is willing to take on the Israelis. The change is going to have to come from inside Israeli society, and it will be very messy. The problem is the state of Judea, the militant settler wing, is politically stronger and more engaged than anyone else in Israel. And unless Israel decides it's going to change, this is only going to get worse. And I know that's not necessarily what everyone wants to hear going into 2025, but that's the reality of the situation. And I would like it. I would like it to be otherwise, but that's what it is. TR, when did the United States become a vassal state of Israel? I would say from the beginning. Keep in mind that Truman was surrounded by Zionist advisors who had helped fund his reelection campaign and who he was now beholden to, who urged him to recognize Israel. Now, the U.S. wasn't the only. USSR did as well, because they also didn't want to lose influence with Zionism for various reasons. But recognizing a unilateral declaration from a state that had just expelled hundreds of thousands of Palestinians from their homes who are non-combatants. We've been a vassal state since 1948. Now, the only time where this was questioned was under the presidency of John F. Kennedy. So JFK wanted AIPAC to register as a foreign agent. So the American Israel Political Action Committee. And someone pointed this out the other day. Who was it who pointed this out? But they said, imagine anything else. So imagine the American Chinese Political Action Committee, the American Russian Political Action Committee. Do you think that those organizations would have any traction in the United States, have any positive coverage? No, because it would be clear that this is a foreign entity trying to get favors in the United States. But the American Israel Political Action Committee, and maybe it doesn't stand for Political Action Committee, but whatever the acronym stands for, that's fine. And to be registered as a foreign agent means that you don't get the privileges that you do as a domestic group. AIPAC fought this. JFK mysteriously gets assassinated, and AIPAC is never forced to register as a foreign agent. So how long has the U.S. been a vassal state of Israel? At least since 1948, a brief interlude in the early 60s in which they were questioned. A few singular instances, Eisenhower during the Suez Crisis telling Israel to get out. Some pressure in the 80s with H.W. Bush about some political actions, but these are one-off actions. We do whatever Israel wants, and when Israel does something we weren't told about, we cover for them. So the estimates are something like 20 or 30 trillion dollars the US has sent to Israel in money and weapons. The US debt is about that much, which means effectively the US has put itself into multi-generational debt for the state of Israel. Think, make of that what you want, but that is a major problem. um, if you've ever watched Eisenhower's farewell address, he quantifies what these costs are. So he'll say something like, one schoolhouse is, you know, the cost of one schoolhouse is this many bombers. So instead of building a schoolhouse, we built all these bombers. And what happens? The bombers either get destroyed or they get retired, but that's it. Their use is a negative use. But what can a schoolhouse do? It can create generations of leaders, good citizens, good people. And what can that do for your nation versus what can bombs do for your nation? And this was a 4-star general, Eisenhower, the last general that we had as a president of the United States. And he was famously said to say to the military lobbyists, and he said it in an impolite manner, so I'll just try to paraphrase it. I don't know what will happen to this country when somebody doesn't know the military like I do. He was able to push back on the military industrial complex because he had been part of it. So he knew when they were trying to run scams on him. American civilian presidents, and there's been fewer and fewer American presidents who ever served in the military, they don't want to seem soft, so they overcompensate. For example, Clinton, I think prior to Clinton, he engaged in more deployment of US forces than almost anyone before him for 20 years because he didn't want to look like a softie. So how do you do that? You overcompensate and you use the military all the time. Like bombing people in Eastern Europe. Public Affairs Committee. Thank you, TR. Political Action Committee, not correct. Public Affairs Committee. Thank you. Hey, Stephen, have you read Ron Unz's American Pravda? I'm going to start it after I've heard of it, and I don't know if I've read an article. I feel like I've read an article of Ron Unz's, but thank you for that suggestion. Let me jot it down. American Pravda. Sounds interesting. How much of our $36 trillion debt is due to our forever wars? Many, if not fought on behalf of Israel. Sorry, how is the sound? I realize my microphone's been over here. I hope the sound's been okay. My question is, what wars are not fought for Israel? Apart from Vietnam and Korea, so since 1948, if we think about the wars that were involved in, Afghanistan was a war related to Israel. They were championing it. Iraq. Our intervention in Libya. What conflicts do we go into? And remember Wesley Clark's famous comment that during the time of the second George Bush presidency, in his first term, they had a list of countries they wanted to go to war with, and all of them are related to Israel's interests. $9 trillion to the war on terror. Yeah, that's just what we know. Remember that there are so many unpublished slush funds. We don't know how many U.S. military bases there are because there are secret ones. We don't know how much money is spent on the U.S. military because there are secret budgets, black budgets where we don't know what's going on. So that's just what we know, I suppose. All right. We are a little over on time. That's fine. I hope we've discussed some important things today. I'm excited to continue the Palestine bookshelf journey with you in 2025, which is coming soon. It has already occurred for some of you if you're further ahead in Asia, for example. But thank you all for taking the time to come, share your comments, share book reviews. Share books for us to add to the list. Thank you. And the best way that we can help the channel grow and to reach more people is for you to like and recommend it to other people who you know might be interested. More people who subscribe, the more YouTube will give it reach, and the more these videos can reach other people, hopefully encourage them to look deeper into things. AIPAC's former president said that he made a deal with Clinton for $1 billion in goodies people don't even know about on a secretly recorded phone call. Yes. Unsurprising. Pleasure meeting all of you. Happy New Year. Happy New Year to you too as well, Chili. And Happy New Year from Anon, sharing with my parents. Thank you very much, everybody. Happy New Year. And we'll see you on the other side, continuing to learn about Palestine and hopefully to help their cause.